In that village, winter was never loved. People prepared for it the way one prepares for a burden, quietly, without complaint, knowing it could not be avoided. They counted firewood, sealed windows, checked roofs. Winter meant frozen roads, heavy silence, and nights that stretched too long for comfort. It was something to endure. That was why Marta was noticed. She did not endure winter. She waited for it. When autumn lingered and the first frost delayed, something restless appeared in her eyes. Not impatience, anticipation, as if winter was not a season to survive, but a moment she had been preparing for all year. Her house stood apart from the others, closer to the open field. The wind reached it first, without trees or fences to slow it down. Snow gathered there deeper, earlier. Some said it was a poor place to build a home. Marta never said otherwise. The house was small, old, and low to the ground. The windows were narrow, the porch worn smooth by years of use. Inside, everything was kept with care, not decorative care, not for show, but deliberate. Each object had a place. Each place carried quiet intention. It did not feel empty. It felt ready. People in the village remembered Marta from earlier years. She had once lived like everyone else. She joined the harvest, shared bread, spoke easily. She did not watch the sky with purpose. Seasons passed, and she passed with them. Then, gradually, something changed. There was no moment people could point to, no loud grief, no announcement, just a slow withdrawal as subtle as the shortening of daylight. Marta began leaving gatherings early. She spoke less, listened more. When winter approached, she grew more attentive rather than tired. She stacked firewood carefully, always more than necessary. She checked the stove again and again, even when it worked perfectly. She repaired the porch not because it was broken, but because it needed to be strong. Strong enough for someone to step onto it. When the first snow finally came each year, Marta stood outside longer than anyone else. She did not rush back into warmth. She watched the field as it disappeared beneath white, as if the land itself were being erased and rewritten. She did not smile, but she did not turn away either. Once a neighbor asked her why she stayed out so long in the cold. Marta answered simply, "I was waiting." "For what?" the woman asked, half laughing. Marta did not answer that question, because winter for her was not about cold, it was about clarity. Snow erased what did not matter. Footprints vanished, old paths disappeared. What remained was only what could endure silence. Her waiting was not anxious, it was disciplined. Each winter night followed the same quiet rhythm. Marta prepared supper, cleaned the table, and left one place unoccupied. She did not speak to it, she did not look at it too often, but it was always there. At night she did not sleep deeply, not because of fear, but because attention requires wakefulness. She listened to the wind crossing the field, to the weight of snow settling on the roof, to the absence of sounds that might have meant something else. She never stood by the road. Waiting, she believed, was not about watching the path. It was about remaining where one could be found. The villagers spoke quietly about her. Some said she lived in the past. Others said she was stronger than she appeared. Most simply accepted her as part of the place, the way one accepts an old tree that no longer grows fruit, but still holds the ground together. They did not know what she waited for, and Marta never explained. Because waiting, when spoken aloud, begins to weaken. It invites interpretation, doubt, impatience. Marta did not need those things. She needed winter to arrive, as it always did, honestly, without compromise. She believed that if something were to return, winter would allow it, and if nothing returned, winter would still tell the truth.
That belief was enough to shape her days. Each year, when the first frost settled into the soil, Marta felt herself align with the season. Not emotionally, physically. Her movements slowed, her thoughts narrowed, everything unnecessary fell away. She was no longer waiting for time to pass. She was waiting for meaning to surface. And winter, patient and exact, continued its approach.
Marta had not always waited. There was a time when her days unfolded without hesitation. She woke early, worked steadily, and rested without listening for what might come next. The seasons passed as they were meant to, planting, harvest, cold, thaw, each with its own rhythm, none demanding special attention. Back then, winter was only winter. Ivan entered her life without announcement. He was not the kind of man people noticed immediately. He did not speak much, did not linger where he was not needed, did not try to impress, but he was present in a way that settled things. When Ivan said he would return by evening, he did. When something needed to be fixed, it was fixed thoroughly, without shortcuts. People trusted him because he did not ask to be trusted. Marta noticed him gradually, first as a familiar figure near her gate, then as someone whose presence felt expected. He helped with firewood, repaired a loose step on her porch, stayed to finish tasks others would have postponed. They did not rush toward one another. Their closeness grew quietly, without declarations. Ivan spoke little about himself. Marta did not ask many questions. It was not secrecy that held them together, but mutual respect for what did not yet need words. When they married, no one was surprised. Life with Ivan was not dramatic, it was solid. Mornings began early, evenings ended calmly. They worked side by side, spoke when necessary, shared silence without discomfort. In the evenings, Ivan often sat outside longer than most men, watching the road stretch into the field. Marta once asked him what he listened for. "Nothing," he said. "I just like to know where things go." At the time, the answer meant little to her. Seasons continued to pass. Winters were cold but ordinary. Snow came, snow melted. Ivan traveled occasionally, sometimes beyond the village, sometimes only as far as the next settlement. He always returned, until the autumn when he didn't. It was not a dramatic departure, no argument, no rushed farewell. Ivan prepared as he always did, checked his boots, wrapped his coat tighter, adjusted the strap of his bag. At the door he paused longer than usual. "If I'm late," he said, "don't worry right away." It was a small sentence, almost casual. Marta nodded. That was the last thing he said to her. Evening came, then night. Marta waited without concern at first. Ivan had returned late before. She kept the stove warm. She listened for footsteps that did not come. Morning arrived quietly. By then, waiting had changed its shape. People searched carefully, without panic. They followed the road, checked the forest's edge, spoke with those who lived farther out. They found traces of movement that led nowhere clear. Rain washed away what little there was. No one told Marta that Ivan was gone. They spoke instead of possibilities, of delays, of roads that confused even those who knew them well. Words were chosen gently, as if certainty itself might do harm. Marta listened and said very little. She did not argue. She did not accept conclusions, because nothing had been concluded. The first winter after Ivan's departure arrived early. Snow fell heavy and fast, erasing the land in a single night. Marta stood at her door longer than usual, watching the field vanish beneath white. Something shifted then. Winter no longer felt like an obstacle. It felt like a condition, as if only under snow could certain things be revealed or returned. Marta did not name this thought.
Naming would have made it fragile. Instead, she prepared. She kept Ivan's things where they were. She did not move his boots, did not fold his coat away, not out of denial, but out of order. Things belonged where they had always belonged until something changed. Winter passed, then another came. Still no words were spoken that would end waiting. And so, waiting remained. Not loud, not desperate, just present. By the second winter, people noticed that Marta no longer endured the cold the way others did. She moved through it deliberately, as if it belonged to her schedule. She stocked firewood early. She sealed the windows carefully. She lived as if winter were not something to survive, but something expected. That was when waiting became visible, and winter, patient as ever, continued to arrive.
After Ivan left, Marta stopped walking the road. Not immediately. At first, she went out the way people usually do, standing at the edge of the village, looking toward the open field, following the path with her eyes as if it might answer her. The road lay quiet and familiar, stretched thin between the houses and the horizon. It looked unchanged. That was what made it difficult. The road did not carry signs of loss. It did not bend or break. It simply continued, indifferent to questions. Marta understood this quickly. Roads do not explain themselves. They allow passage, nothing more. So she stopped going to it. Instead, she waited at home. Her house became the center of her waiting. The stove burned steadily, not for comfort alone, but to keep the space alive. Ivan's chair remained where he had left it. His coat still hung near the door, heavy with the shape of his shoulders. Marta did not touch these things often. She did not need to. Their presence was enough. People spoke around her carefully. They mentioned rain that had washed tracks away. They mentioned a stretch of forest where paths often confused travelers. They mentioned how early darkness came that year. Each sentence avoided a conclusion. Each explanation left space for something else. Marta listened without interrupting. She did not ask what they truly believed. She knew that belief without certainty only multiplies noise. What mattered was that no one said the words that would end waiting. As long as those words were not spoken, the road remained unfinished. Winter deepened this feeling. Snow fell thick and steady, smoothing the land until all lines blurred together. The road disappeared beneath white, not erased but hidden. Marta found comfort in this. Snow removed the illusion of direction. It made everyone equal, unsure, careful, slowed. Winter did not promise answers, but it allowed silence. At night, Marta listened. She did not expect footsteps. Expectation brings disappointment. Instead, she listened to absence, to the wind crossing the field, to the soft collapse of snow from the roof, to the long pauses between sounds. These pauses mattered. Waiting, she learned, was not about looking outward. It was about remaining present long enough for something to change shape. The villagers noticed her rhythm shift. Marta no longer spoke of seasons as obstacles. She did not complain about cold or darkness. She adjusted to winter as one adjusts to a known guest, without surprise, without resistance. Some thought this meant she had accepted Ivan's absence. They were wrong. Acceptance closes doors. Marta kept hers open, quietly, without display. The house was not frozen in time. It moved forward carefully, preserving what mattered, releasing what did not. One winter evening, a neighbor asked her why she never stood at the road anymore. Marta answered honestly, "If he returns, he won't come because I watched." The woman did not understand, but she nodded anyway. As winters passed, the road changed in people's minds.
It became a place of speculation rather than certainty. Some said it led too far. Others said it turned where no one remembered. Stories grew, softened, then faded. For Marta, the road became something else entirely. It was no longer a path outward. It was a boundary between knowing and not knowing, between movement and stillness, and boundaries, she believed, were meant to be respected. Winter after winter, snow continued to erase the road, and winter after winter, Marta remained. Not frozen, not trapped, aligned. She began to understand that waiting was not something she did because Ivan was gone. It was something she did because his path was unfinished, and unfinished paths do not end on roads. They end in people. As long as winter came, and as long as silence remained honest, Marta knew she was still meant to wait, and the road, hidden beneath snow, kept its answer.
Waiting did not weaken Marta. It changed her. At first, she had believed waiting was something passive, something endured. But as winters passed, she understood that waiting required discipline. It demanded attention, restraint, and the ability to remain still while everything else urged movement. People often mistook this stillness for resignation. They were wrong. Marta did not wait because she lacked strength to act. She waited because action without meaning would only scatter what little certainty remained. The village lived by motion, planting, traveling, repairing, moving forward. Marta lived by alignment, with season, silence, and memory. There were things she did not share, not because she wanted secrecy, but because words would flatten them. Some experiences, once spoken, become smaller than they truly are. She remembered the months before Ivan left. He had not been restless. He had been deliberate. His silences were not empty. They were weighted. Sometimes he would sit outside after supper, longer than the night required, watching the dark field as if listening for something beneath the wind. Once, Marta asked him what held his attention. "There are moments," he said, "when a place asks something of you." She laughed then, lightly, assuming it was one of his half-formed thoughts. Ivan did not laugh back. Only now did those words return with weight. Marta realized that Ivan had not been pulled away by accident. Whatever lay beyond the road had been chosen, not impulsively, but carefully. He had gone because something unfinished required him. That understanding did not bring comfort. It brought responsibility. Winter sharpened this awareness. Snow stripped the land to essentials. Every object stood alone, defined. Marta found herself doing the same, removing what distracted her, keeping only what mattered. She stopped filling time. No unnecessary visits, no long conversations. She worked, rested, and waited, not in isolation, but in precision. Each day had a shape. Each evening ended the same way. The village noticed the change. Marta's waiting no longer felt like grief. It felt purposeful. Some people began bringing small offerings without explanation. Firewood stacked near her door, bread left quietly. No one asked questions. No one spoke of Ivan. Waiting, somehow, had become shared. Yet Marta remained careful. She did not accept sympathy. Sympathy assumes an ending. She lived in a space where endings had not yet been permitted. One night, during the fourth winter, Marta awoke suddenly. Not from a sound, from absence. The house felt different, not empty, but altered. The air carried a weight she could not name. She sat up, listening. The wind had stopped.
Snow fell straight down, without drift. This stillness frightened her more than noise ever had. She understood then that waiting could not continue unchanged forever. Winter was patient, but it was not endless. If something was to happen, it would require more than readiness. It would require choice. Marta sat until morning without lighting the stove. When dawn came, she felt certain of one thing. Waiting alone was no longer enough. Not because Yvonne had returned, but because whatever held him away was nearing completion. The realization did not bring clarity. It brought tension. Marta did not yet know what she would do, but she knew she would not wait forever. Winter had taught her to listen. Now it was asking her to respond.
The change did not arrive suddenly. It came the way winter itself often does, quietly, without warning, when no one is watching closely enough to mark the exact moment. Marta noticed it not through sound or movement, but through a subtle shift in how the village behaved around her. It began with small things. One morning, she found a stack of firewood placed neatly beside her house. It had not been there the night before. The wood was dry, cut evenly, arranged with care. No note, no footprints nearby. Marta did not ask who had brought it. She understood the language of such gestures. They were not gifts, they were acknowledgments. Soon after, a neighbor stopped her on the road, not to speak, but to walk beside her for a while. They exchanged a few simple words about the weather, about the snow holding longer than expected, nothing more. When they parted, the woman touched Marta's sleeve briefly, as if to confirm something unspoken. Waiting had become visible. People did not say Ivan's name. They did not ask questions, but they began to adjust their movements, their tone, their timing around Marta, as if her waiting had created a gravity they could no longer ignore. Then, during the fifth winter, something happened that could not be dismissed as coincidence. It was early morning when Marta saw the tracks. They did not begin at the road. They appeared at the edge of the field, where snow usually lay untouched, stretching in a clean, unbroken expanse. The footprints were deep, steady, deliberate. They moved toward the village and stopped. Not faded, not scattered, stopped. Marta stood at her door for a long time, wrapped in her coat, studying the snow. The tracks were too clear to be old, too controlled to be accidental. Whoever had walked there had known where they were going, and then, just as clearly, had chosen not to continue. Marta did not follow the tracks. She understood that following would change their meaning. Some signs are not invitations, they are confirmations. By midday, others had noticed. People spoke quietly. They pointed. They measured distances with their eyes. Explanations were offered. Travelers, hunters, drifting snow reshaped by wind. But none of those explanations satisfied, because no one could explain why the tracks stopped where they did. That evening, someone came to Marta's house. It was not a visit, it was a presence. A man stood near the edge of her yard, not approaching, not retreating. When Marta stepped outside, he nodded once, not greeting, not farewell, and left. He said nothing, but he had seen the tracks too. Marta realized then that waiting had crossed a threshold. It was no longer something that belonged only to her and Winter. Others were now part of it, whether they wished to be or not. The village did not know what to do with this knowledge. It hovered uneasily like fog that refuses to lift, but people began to behave differently. They lingered longer in the evenings. They listened more carefully to the wind. They paid attention to the silence between sounds. Waiting was contagious. Marta felt the weight of this change.
She had never intended to draw others into her waiting, but now that it had happened, she understood its responsibility. Waiting, once shared, could not remain passive. That night, Marta did not sleep. She sat near the stove, watching the fire settle into embers, thinking not of Ivan's return, but of his purpose. If he had gone willingly, if something had called him beyond the road, then these signs were not meant to comfort her. They were meant to prepare her. By morning, the tracks were gone. Snow had fallen again, light and even, smoothing the field back into emptiness. But the effect remained. Something had shifted in the village's awareness. People no longer treated winter as background, they treated it as presence. And Marta knew, without fear, without doubt, that waiting had entered its next stage. Winter had answered her patience, not with resolution, with invitation.
After the tracks disappeared, Marta began to remember differently. Not more, but deeper. Memories that had once seemed ordinary now revealed weight. Ivan's silences, his pauses before speaking, the way he looked at the land not as territory but as responsibility. Marta realized that what she had been waiting for was not simply his return. She had been waiting for understanding. Ivan had never spoken openly about his past, not because he hid it, but because he did not yet know how to place it into words. He had come to the village carrying something unresolved, something that did not belong to any one moment, but stretched across years. Once, long before his final departure, Marta told Ivan about a winter long ago, a winter when a man had gone out and never returned, not from their village, from another place. Ivan had been young then, strong, certain that effort could correct anything. It hadn't. What stays, Ivan said, staring at the fire, is not the loss, it's the responsibility. Marta had not asked what he meant. Now she understood. Ivan's leaving had not been escape, it had been continuation. Something had remained undone, not in the village, but beyond it. A promise left incomplete, a debt not measured in money or time. The tracks in the snow were not signs of his return, they were reminders of his direction. Marta began sorting through Ivan's things carefully, not to preserve them, but to read them. Notes folded into pockets, small markings scratched into the leather of his bag, maps not drawn for navigation, but for memory. Everything pointed outward, toward the places winter strips bare. Marta felt the weight of realization settle fully. If Ivan had gone to finish something, then her waiting had never been meant to pull him back. It had been meant to keep the path open, not for him, but for truth. This understanding did not end her waiting. It refined it. She stopped listening for footsteps. She stopped expecting signs that would bring relief. Instead, she listened for change, in herself, in the village, in the way winter now behaved. The cold no longer felt empty. It felt purposeful. Marta began preparing differently. She no longer stored firewood only for survival. She gathered supplies as if someone might need shelter, not necessarily Ivan, but someone shaped by the same unfinished path. Waiting had transformed into readiness, and readiness carries responsibility. One evening, as snow fell thick and steady, Marta understood something with clarity that surprised her. Ivan might never return, and still everything he had done would matter. Because meaning is not erased by absence, it is completed by those who remain. Winter deepened, and Marta knew the next step would not come to her. She would have to step into it.
Marta did not decide all at once. The choice had been forming for years, shaped by silence, by winter after winter, by the steady discipline of waiting without answers. But now that it stood before her clearly, she recognized it for what it was, not a break from waiting, but its natural continuation. Winter had given her everything it could. The signs had come and gone, the tracks had appeared and vanished. The village had felt the shift and grown quieter, more attentive. What remained was not mystery, but responsibility. If Ivan had gone to complete something unfinished, then someone had to remain, not just to remember, but to act. Marta began by opening her house. Not in any formal way. There were no announcements, no invitations. She simply left the porch light on longer at night. She kept the stove burning even when the house was warm enough. She prepared food in portions meant for more than one person. People noticed. A traveler came first, a man delayed by snow, unsure of the road ahead. Marta gave him shelter without questions. He stayed the night, warmed himself by the fire, and left at dawn with quiet gratitude. Then another came, and then another. Word spread slowly, not through speech, but through pattern. Marta's house became a place where winter did not push people onward blindly, a place where movement paused long enough for choice to matter. Marta understood what she was doing. She was not replacing Ivan's path. She was holding space for it. Each person who stopped at her door carried something unfinished: exhaustion, doubt, fear of continuing without clarity. Marta did not solve these things. She did not advise. She provided warmth, silence, and time. Winter, she learned, does not test people through cold alone. It tests them through isolation. By opening her house, Marta changed the nature of the waiting. It no longer pointed backward toward what was lost. It pointed outward toward what could still be carried forward. The village adjusted. People stopped warning travelers to hurry through the cold. They began pointing to Marta's house instead, not as refuge from winter, but as part of moving through it honestly. Marta did not speak of Ivan, but in every fire she lit, every door she opened, his choice was present, not as absence, as direction. Some nights, when the house was quiet again, Marta sat alone by the stove and allowed herself to feel the weight of what she had taken on. This was no small thing. To wait for winter was one kind of strength. To answer it was another. Yet she did not regret the step, because waiting, she understood now, is not meant to last forever in one form. If it never changes, it becomes stagnation. If it deepens and moves, it becomes purpose. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, the fire held. And somewhere beyond the village, the road Ivan had chosen continued its quiet work, not erased, not complete, but no longer alone.
Winter did not end suddenly. It loosened its grip slowly, as if unwilling to leave without making sure everything had settled into its proper place. Snow remained heavy on the ground, even when the days grew longer. Cold stayed in the shadows, patient, observant. Marta noticed that people no longer spoke of winter as an enemy. They spoke of it as a passage. Travelers still came to her house, fewer now, but with more intention. Those who arrived did not come only because of cold. They came because they had heard there was a place where silence was respected, where no one demanded explanations for unfinished journeys. Marta offered the same things she always had: warmth, food, time. But something within her had shifted. She no longer listened for signs in the snow. She no longer measured nights by how deeply she could hear the wind. The waiting that had once defined her had completed its work. One evening, as the snow softened and began to sink underfoot, Marta stepped outside and walked toward the field. The road was visible again, not clearly, not sharply, but enough to know where it ran. She followed it a short distance, stopping where the tracks had once appeared and vanished. The ground was bare now, no marks, no traces, and yet the place felt full.
Marta stood there for a long time, understanding something she had not understood before. Winter had never been about bringing Ivan back. It had been about holding space long enough for meaning to settle. Ivan had gone to finish something that required winter, not cold, but stripping away. He had left so that what mattered could stand alone, without comfort or distraction. And Marta had waited so that this truth would not be lost. By remaining, by aligning herself with winter rather than resisting it, she had preserved something essential, not a person, but a path of responsibility. The road had not returned Ivan, it had returned purpose. That evening, Marta returned home and extinguished the fire earlier than usual, not because it was no longer needed, but because it had already done its work. The village felt the change. People began to move differently, less hurried, more deliberate. Winter no longer pressed against them. It passed through, leaving behind a quieter strength. When spring finally arrived, it did not announce itself loudly. Snow receded, earth darkened, the road dried and firmed beneath new light. Marta did not mark the moment. She simply lived, and in that living, winter was complete.
Spring arrived quietly, not with warmth, not with celebration, just with permission. Snow retreated without resistance. The ground darkened and softened. The road remained firm again, no longer hidden, no longer demanding attention. Marta did not greet the change. She did not stand outside to watch the thaw. She had learned that some endings do not require witnesses. They complete themselves whether anyone looks or not. Her house changed subtly. The fire burned lower at night, not weaker, calmer. The porch light no longer stayed on until dawn. Travelers still came, but less often. Those who did stayed briefly, as if sensing that the season of pause had passed. Marta welcomed them the same way she always had, but she no longer waited. Ivan did not return, and yet nothing in her life felt unresolved. The waiting she had practiced for so many winters had not been meant to keep her in place. It had been meant to teach her how to remain without fear, how to hold space without demanding answers. That knowledge stayed. People in the village rarely spoke of those winters now. Time smoothed the memory, as it always does, but they remembered how winter once felt different, more deliberate, more honest. They remembered Marta, not as the woman who lost someone, but as the woman who understood winter. And because of that understanding, something lasting had been built, not a shelter, not a tradition, but a way of moving through difficult seasons without becoming smaller. One evening, long after the snow was gone, Marta walked to the edge of the field. The road stretched ahead, open and ordinary. She looked at it briefly. Then she turned back toward her house. Some paths are not meant to be followed forever. They exist so that someone may wait long enough to learn when to let go. And winter, having finished its work, never needed to return. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and share what it meant to you. These legends are told slowly, for those who listen all the way through. Subscribe to the channel for more quiet stories told by the fire.